All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a minute. We've got a few more folks filtering in, so bear with me just a moment. Do have this recording, so as people populate in, you should get the notification on that, and we'll kind of jump in from there. So, but thanks everybody for joining so far. Just in the conscience of time, I'll go ahead and get started on it here. I do believe the Q&A is open, so if at any point in time you want to drop a question in there, I'll work to leave some time in the end to go ahead and get to try and get through those and try and answer those as efficiently as I can. But of course, you can always email me as well too. So just a quick heads up, we will make the slides and the recording available. You can follow that bit.ly link. To be honest, it's the same link that you used to register, so try to keep things simple. Just brief intro. I'm Jason Dodge. I'm the founder and CEO of Black Truck Media and Marketing based here in Grand Rapids. For those of you who don't know us or you're not familiar with us here at Black Truck, for 16 years, we've specialized in ensuring that brands remain discoverable online, visible, deliver results that matter to your bottom line. We're very proud of that. We're very humbled by what we do, being a specialty shop, not a full service shop. We really make this our commitment, and it's been great to be recognized about that. So let's move on. We've got a lot to get through in a relatively short period of time here, so we'll kind of get started. And I want to start with this. Your brand is already being described by AI. So we have Google with AI overviews, we have ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot, name your flavor, name your brand. They're all summarizing our products, they're summarizing our brands, our services, and they're really rewriting our brands. We're kind of in this era of a brand rewrite, if you will. And the question really to ask yourself is, are you in charge of, or are you shaping that story, or are you letting it happen to you? That's the big question that I kind of want you to think about as we go through this over the course of the next probably 40, 45 minutes here. And we all remember what the Google search landscape used to look like. If you're a search nerd like me who's been doing this for 20 years, we have a lot of screenshots and obscure data kind of sitting on the shelf of what the SERPs used to look like. Sponsored listings, maybe 10 blue links, certainly a growing and sometimes overwhelming search engine results page. But this is really the kind of response that customers are getting today. So there's absolutely no website visit in some situations. So there's no or minimal action that's taken, no click, just a short, confident summary, and that potentially their decision is probably made right here. All of us can probably align with that in one way or another. As consumers of different brands and different products, we've all experienced this. And what we have to realize is that this is the new front door for many of our brands out there. So instead of just Google and Google search, we now have all of these tools and platforms that we need to contend with for our audiences, for our visibility. ChatGPT is probably the biggest one right now, with OpenAI having the most groundswell and the market share. But I would say Claude is directly behind them. Google and all of their investments in their Gemini product and how that's ingrained in anything you do if you are a Google shop. Certainly Microsoft and Copilot. For those of you who are Microsoft shops or a Microsoft house, that's integrated in your day-to-day. Perplexity, etc. There's a bunch that are hanging out there that I'm not even mentioning. So, and they all have different specialties. So we really have been on this growth path for the last 3 years at this point with AI. But before we get too deep into the weeds and talk about everything that we're going to cover today, I do want to kind of cover a couple things from a broad stroke perspective. Is that as marketers, we keep asking and keep looking where our traffic has gone. And I want to share some fresh, I would say, perspective with you, because the reality of the situation is it's not that the traffic went somewhere, or maybe we have this feeling that it was removed completely from our website. It's this understanding that these conversations are happening elsewhere and not just our site. but the adoption of AI tools has actually been shrinking. And I'm not saying this just in defense of my profession in the SEO space, but the data doesn't lie here. There's been that growth trajectory that happened probably really early on, that spring of 2023, shiny new object. Everybody rushed out to sign up for these platforms to test and to trial them. But that trajectory is slowing, which suggests we could potentially reach somewhat of a steady plateau in the next 12 to 24 months. What does that mean for us in the digital marketing space? I still think that there's a lot of noise versus limited signal that tells us what absolutely is going to be going on. But the data doesn't lie in terms of if you look at the trend and not the absolute. Because the vast majority of traditional search users, they're heavy users. So if you're still kind of on that side of the fence where you're more of a traditional user, you always go to Google and you kind of rely on Google because you trust it. You're a heavy user of their platform. And that said, you actually have a minimal fluctuation. You're going to continue to utilize that platform. So what does this all mean? What it means is that your audience is still out there searching, period. But the platform and the interface, that's what continues to change. And that's what continues to change what you can see and what you can't see in terms of how you're measuring the efficacy of your digital marketing efforts. So big takeaways from today's session, kind of five key segments, if you will, is AI and zero-click trends. We'll talk about trends, how AI search works, what zero-click discovery really means. Hopefully you can find some different points in how that aligns with your brand, perhaps questions that you're fielding by individuals that you work with, how AI describes your brand. So, whether you are a destination and you're in the travel and tourism space, or you work in consumer products, how these platforms describe your brand and how you can influence that is something that we're going to work to break down. And then, what's your brand voice in AI? Because I believe that brand now more than ever, and that brand voice really matters. And how you make it AI friendly is what's going to be important. So we'll break down a couple different ways to think about that, provide you with a framework and some more question and answer type roles that you could go through with your company, and then auditing and measuring, because like anything, it's going to come back to what's the value in this. And I think we're fielding in the digital marketing space and certainly in the search space and having access to a lot of data, we're answering a lot of those questions right now. It's, are we showing up? So auditing the presence in AI tools like Google's AI overviews, ChatGPT. I'll show you a couple different ways that you can segment those audiences out inside of GA4 to be able to see the actual value. So if someone finds you there and they come through, what are they doing? Is the conversion rate the same? Is it not? Without that data, we can't really see what's going on. And then future-proofing strategies. There's certainly no way to future-proof everything. Let's talk this more through about steps in ways in which you can prepare your content, prepare your team, shareholders, partners to this new reality. Having spent, again, 20 years in the search industry, I've certainly have seen my fair share of ups and downs and shifts in this landscape. Google changes its algorithm, hundreds of times a year. This is all very reactive for marketers, and that's just one thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. Search used to be about finding links and clicking. So it was saw the result, saw the link, and I clicked on it. But now those results have really become the answers. So it's an answer, it's not a pathway. And Google and those other platforms that I mentioned before are doing the thinking for us as users, for us as customers, and it's happening instantly without that click. And that's what we mean by zero click. And zero click search isn't anything new. So from an educational perspective, the search journey is shorter. It ends on the results. So it ends on the search results page, even before sometimes the user finishes typing, right? It autofills. And we're already living in this world. It's not a future trend. So if you read all of the buzz that's going on about zero-click searches, this is the future. No, it's actually probably been around. I think the first featured snippet, or what some might refer to as answer boxes, came out somewhere around like 2014, is when Google started to experiment with those and really disrupt and interrupt their own search engine results pages. If anything, AIO, I will dare to say AIO reviews are the newest rendition of a featured snippet. Just kind of think of it in that context if you ever need to explain it to anybody. So none of this is new, right? Tell me something I don't know. But last year, my friends at Spark to Our Own Data did a study and found that 60% of Google searches end without a click. But 80% of users really rely on zero-click results. It's a mouthful, for at least 40% of their searches. So I'll kind of say that again. So 80% of users rely on zero-click results for at least 40% of their searches. And that's a huge shift. It's changed what success looks like or should look like. So just showing up in search isn't enough. You also need to be showing up in the summary or in the conversations of where your customer is at. That could be Google, that might be on other platforms. So whether it's something like a hotel suggestion, if I'm looking to travel somewhere, to top branded products based on a use, must see attractions, etc., the users are increasingly not clicking. We know that. But one thing's for sure is they're still making decisions, right? I mean, we're all still generating leads, we're all still generating revenue. That has remained the same, and some have seen that grow even with the rise in AIO and zero-click searches. But there's certainly an impact on traffic. And I think this is a perfect visual of what's changed. It's very easy to understand. The old path had steps. We had a discovery, clicks, site visits, and then the conversion. Now that entire funnel is compressed into a single experience, a single user experience. AI delivers the answer and the user moves on. Done. Like period, end of discussion. This shift really has caused real traffic losses for many brands. It might be your brand. It might not be your brand. Your brand may not be impacted by this. It impacts every brand differently. It impacts every industry differently. There is not a one size fits all with any of this, but Google referrals are down. If we use like travel and tourism segments, for instance, or education, the referrals from Google-based traffic sources are down 20% in those sectors. So you might already be feeling that. You may not be feeling that yet. So it's something to pay attention to. So old search, 10 blue links, the click, and the website. Now we have an AI overview. The answer is provided to us, and the decision is made right there. Obviously, that decision could be made that I know who I'm going to work with, so I can take action then, or it puts that brand in my mind, or I do click. That all is a part of that decision tree. So we get into this situation that we see clicks collapse. So what the consumer sees in this case is AI overviews summarize the options for me in 100 words or less. So it's pulling in from multiple sites, multiple brands, but maybe it's not necessarily yours. I'm seeing a lot of brands that are unknown brands show up for AI overviews. These are brands that don't have a lot of authority. They're not the big brands that I might think of. And so the user has already potentially made their decision at this point. They're getting educated in the process. So the organic click-through rates are dropping fast because these answers feel complete. And no one is probably scrolling down anymore. And so multiple sources are cited in these situations, but there aren't clicks that happen. Going back just a month ago when Google did away with their whole num equals 100, which means we couldn't scrape the top 100 of SERPs, that's where you see your impression sharing Google Search Console just get cut probably 20 to 50%, but clicks probably remain the same. Again, people aren't scrolling. Those features inside of Search Console were being used for something else. They were being used for rank tracking and a lot of the other SEO software tools out there that we employ, you might employ, and others do. So we get into this data disconnect. It's what many of, I would say, those of us in the industry, in the search industry specifically, called the great decoupling that happened somewhere, I would say spring, summertime, right? And we see this as a little bit of a strange phenomenon that I mentioned briefly is that impressions go up, but clicks drop off. And it continues to remain. And again, every industry has been hit differently with this. So you're showing up but no one is visiting your site. And that's a signal that AI is giving people what they need, before they even engage with you directly. It may not just mean that you fell out of rank. It means that you're showing up, but there's no incentive. There's no reason for people to click on you because Google's removed that friction, right? They've provided you with the answer. They, in their mind, Google's mind, have improved their user experience by providing you with the answer. And we have to remember that not all sites are created equal. So again, not all industries are created equal and not all sites are created equal. Both of these sites, this is an export from Search Console over a lengthy period of time. While in similar landscapes, they serve completely different audiences. You have a local service provider versus an e-commerce retailer, specifically a brand that has an exceptional content strategy that's already in motion and was in motion well before a lot of these changes. These sites are viewed as more helpful, not only by the robot, but they're more helpful to the audience. And we have to keep in mind that in some cases, that's what the platform cares about more. It's not just about keyword stuffing and gaming the system. It's never been that way. It really is about the audience and who we're trying to target and how we're communicating with them. So I want to get into how AI can be a test bed for marketing and kind of prompt you with this and what this might means perhaps for you as you look into the next fiscal year. It means that your visibility strategy has to evolve. If you're just tracking clicks as a measure of a success, or perhaps you've only been measuring absolute website traffic, you're missing the bigger picture. And we're entering a phase where being cited is probably more valuable than being clicked. I would say maybe in some situations, being cited is even more valuable than just getting the link back to your website at this point in time. We won't get into the weeds on whether I want to follow or no follow link. I think AI throws that out the window. And really, if anything, I'm excited because it feels like the early days of search back when I was getting started too. There's a lot of testing and there's a lot of different iterations that can happen. So search behavior, it's changed again. And we get this infiltration of AI overviews and answers that kind of really come into play in a traditional search sense and changes that landscape again. And that traffic alone no longer is really telling that full story. So that visibility is all about the engagement. If you're not in that summary, you're not visible and you're not a part of that engagement and you're not a part of that conversation. You don't have a seat at the table. And that's going to bring up more questions. That's going to bring up more questions from C-suite and your board. What's the value of this stuff? And it really comes back to understanding your audience. Is my audience even there? Are they even searching? What types of searches are prompting AI overviews and things of that nature to say, is that really where I need to be? If you're a B2B brand, that answer is going to be very different than if you are an e-commerce retailer. So this is section two. Let's talk about AI descriptors and how AI specifically is describing your brand. And what you can do to help shape the narrative, because there certainly are some things that you can do. I don't want to say that you can go as far as manipulating the results. Again, I think that gets into some potential black hat stuff. Do I think we're headed down a path of some general spamminess? Absolutely. So proceed with caution, but let's kind of dive in and see where we can go. Um, I want to break down an AI summary versus a website visit. If we look at what's really happening behind the scenes in these AI generated answers, we have to break it down fundamentally. Individuals used to click through to your website for this type of information, but not anymore. Now AI is going to consolidate that information, right? So it consolidates the information and it presents it instantly. There's no need for a visit. We covered that before. And what you're seeing here is how Google AI Overview might summarize a query like things to do in Traverse City. And if you're the official destination marketing association, the DMO for Visit Traverse City, I'm going to start to look at this and say, ooh, is my brand a part of that conversation? Is my site a part of this response? Because you've lost the click, but what's more important here is you may have lost control of the narrative. And I think that's the piece that you want to remember here. It's like, yep, okay, we lost the click. Sure, that went out the window. But what about the narrative? Are we helping steer this conversation and are we a part of that? Where are the AI platforms, if you will. Where are the large language models getting and sourcing their information from? Google AI overviews, it's pulling from multiple sources, and yours may or may not be one of them. So where AI typically pulls from, that's going to vary based on the model. We also have to keep in mind that large language models, so ChatGPT, for instance, is a large language model. So they're in the world of AI and machine learning. They're large language models. They've learned off of a corpus of data, to try and spare you the incredibly nerdy stuff. They're only as good as the information that they've been provided. So the old adage of garbage in, garbage out is there. They're really good at regurgitating bad information. And that's really what an LLM is designed to do. It's to say, I have all of this information. Here's how people typically talk about that thing. Here's the answer that I think is most relevant to you. That may not be true. But AI is getting its information by, it's not just scraping your homepage. These tools are looking at things like structured data, trusted third-party sites, where you're being talked about, and anywhere your brand is mentioned with consistency and clarity. Those two things really stand out. If your content isn't well structured or widely distributed, AI is probably not even going to consider it. There's some models that might, but for the most part, those two things really are standout. Nearly most of the tool providers out there, from Moz to SEMrush, Ahrefs, kind of you name it, they all have something available now for you to be able to see the types of pages that are ranking. And so, in short, your content needs to be technically clean, strategically placed, and brand aligned everywhere. So we want to make sure that our content is clean, meaning it's formatted, it's easy to get through. It's easy not only to read from a user perspective, right? Natural language is a real thing, but it's factually correct. It's strategically placed in the areas that my customers are actually doing research. They're actually reading about the things that it is that I do, and that it is aligned with your brand and your brand messaging everywhere it's positioned. And we get into this discussion around, I like to talk about it as the role of source quality. So AI favors authority. So they prioritize this idea around credibility and structure and recency as well, depending on the industry. So if your information is buried in long, unstructured copy that was written for search robots 5 to 6 years ago, or if third-party sites outrank you, you lose. Google's AI weighs structure, clarity, and freshness, which is the recency, which chooses what it wants to summarize. I'm not saying that's truthful all the time. And I've seen it in some scholarly articles and more technical data sets where it will reference things back to like 2006. I had one where it pulled up a PDF that was from 97, talk about the early days of the web, and kind of dating myself. But many times it's going to prefer third-party sources over your own content. And that's just the reality that we're in, depending on the intent of the search and the query. And that's why being accurate isn't enough. You have to be both accurate and AI readable. And what I mean by that is that if it's prioritizing that credibility and that structure, this is really what helps lead up to, if I'm accurate in terms of, in this case, I want to know about safe areas to stay in Albuquerque. Is that factually correct, and who is being recommended here? Is downtown the area that I want to visit? Is that as safe as what the other site is recommending? And also, why is that what TripAdvisor is kicking up? As a user or as a potential traveler to that area, that's going to start to make me have some questions about what's going on, in your region and in your area. So the role of source quality is important in these cases. So I wasn't going to talk about acronyms and play some buzzword bingo, but I'm going to. I have to do this. If you're used to SEO and the themes of SEO, I would say that this is kind of the next evolution of acronyms for digital marketers. So meet AO, AEO, or GEO. Answer engine optimization. You're going to hear that. You're going to hear generative engine optimization. So answer engine optimization is all about how do we make our site machine readable? So FAQs, schema, clear headings, and structure. Geo is about how generative tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., interpret your brand. It's about content that's written in a way that AI understands it and confidently will quote it. They don't replace SEO, but they layer on top. So this potentially could be your new playbook and themes of your new playbook. But let's keep in mind, it's search at the end of the day, because acronyms don't mean much to me. If for those of you who are attending this, who if we've met in person, we've spoken on a phone or at conference, you know I don't get too deep into the acronyms, and I love to cut the hype from the reality. You can go look up geo on Google right now, and it's not going to be generative engine optimization. It's probably going to have something to do with geography or Nat Geo or another brand or something like that. So marketers who are selling the approach here have some work to do. And I'd encourage you to be skeptical. There's a big reason why those of us who are long-standing individuals in the SEO community in the industry have kind of been against some of these acronyms, because at the end of the day, it's not a replacement for SEO. It's an evolution and it's a layer. It does start with a search. Search just might not be on Google, might not be on Bing. It could be on Reddit. It could be on TikTok. Just all depends on your audience and the intent behind what it is that people are looking for. So I would encourage you to check out the podcast that we did on this with Nick Leroy from SEO Jobs. It was a great conversation about how we cut through the hype and provide some more clarity on what the reality of a lot of this is, and what more purposely, it's around what people are selling right now in this space. So if you're going through this with a current service provider, you have questions on it, it really breaks it down into, I would say, an unfiltered, maybe slightly salty view on on the hype that is out there of what people are selling. Because truth be told, everybody is an AI expert on LinkedIn right now. So accuracy and trust risks. I want to talk about this. AI doesn't always get it right. And when it doesn't, your brand suffers. So it misquotes with outdated information, even fictional content. It happens. I do a search. I would say this was earlier days of ChatGPT. I'm planning a guy's golf trip in northern Michigan. I'm very specific about what I want. Bonus if there's any restaurants with stay and play. Yeah, that's great. It gives me a lot of really great, pieces of information to help plan my trip. And I think that's awesome. But then I go further and I say, yeah, but are there any golf courses in northern Michigan that are open year round? If you are in Michigan, you know that's probably not the case. And I think we have one Top Golf in the state, and that's not a golf course. The reality is that they deliver me with this. They tell me that, oh yeah, actually there's a golf club on Mackinac Island that's open, and it's open year round, weather permitting. The last time I checked, this is typically what Mackinac Island looks like in the middle of winter. So AI overviews are perceived as incorrect. So if an AI overview is perceived as incorrect by the user, the click-through rate is going to drop by up to 60%. So that trust breaks immediately. You've gone from being a helpful resource of information to saying, that's reality. That's not real. So you're going to be ignored, or worse, avoided. So again, you want to make sure that if you're being summarized, you're not summarized poorly. You want to be summarized powerfully. Because if AI is telling your story, we want to make sure it's the right one. They're already summarizing your brand, and you can't fully control it, but you absolutely can influence, right? We all have, hopefully, some loose brand standards, some loose brand guidelines. Our ads team, for instance, is always asking, hey, tell us what we can't say, because it's not only a brand security and brand safety thing, but it also plays into a lot of this conversation as well. So, what's true, what's unique and compelling about your brand needs to be echoed across multiple sources and done in a way that AI can understand it. That structure, clarity, being greater than creativity. I'm not knocking exceptional copywriters here by any means. I'm just saying, is it factual? Is it structured appropriately? And is it clear to the person what it is that I'm reading? So how do we own our brand voice in AI? Brand voice really factors into all of this, truthfully, because being generic, so generic summaries won't cut it. They certainly aren't going to cut it in the competitive search landscape of now and in the future, and certainly not in the generative AI space or generative engine space as well. So these are really key things that we need to be thinking about: is how do we own our brand voice? And there's a big difference between what AI reads versus what a human sees and what we read. Humans and AIs, we don't read the same way. What feels warm and emotional and immersive to a human, those are all those good brand feels that instill trust that that's the brand for me. It probably most likely is going to be invisible or meaningless to an AI model. Keep in mind, they're not sentient. They don't have feelings. As much as ChatGPT is going to respond to you and make you feel like the best person in the world, it doesn't care. It doesn't care about you. Its goal is just to tell you what you think you want to hear, right? So AI scans structure, it scans tone and signals, not visuals, meaning not vibes. That's what brand voice must be clearly defined. You have to define that clearly in your structured content and not just your ad campaigns. So, not just your campaigns, it all has to be structured kind of synonymously across the web as it pertains to your brand because the AI is reading your information and your content about your brand completely different than us as individuals. And generic content or generic branding is often overlooked, and that's going to be the difference between showing up and standing out. So AI tends to quote language that is confident, specific, and memorable. If your content sounds like everyone else's, AI is going to treat it that way. Again, large language model. It's going to deliver blue, red, green because those are common colors, and that's what it knows in its learning set. It's not going to recommend orange, purple, yellow because maybe those are not as common, right? That's a pretty basic thing that people can understand, and it's because those words, that language is the most commonly used. It's not going to stand out. So brands, you need to lean into what is truly distinct and say it in a way that is scannable and repeatable. If our content sounds generic, AI is going to treat it that way. If it sounds distinct, AI begins to associate expertise, authority alongside our names. So just kind of to repeat that, if the content sounds generic, AI is going to treat it that way, right? So if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it sounds distinct, it's very unique. AI begins to associate that with a certain level of expertise and authority alongside our brand name. So building an AI-friendly brand voice, I don't think has to be fairly difficult. And I'm not a brand marketer, but I think I can go through these different steps. Heck, you probably could train a fellow AI, tool of choice to go through some of this with you to build personas and see how this stuff sounds. But in the AI era, our brand voice isn't just for humans; it's also for a machine in these learning models and where the humans are learning from and reading. So a simple framework to define your brand voice for AI. I think step one, ask your question of what's your core message? This defines who we serve and what we stand for. Are we just a parts manufacturer or are we the trusted source for technicians, performance enthusiasts, and repair professionals who demand quality and reliability, right? I say the same thing about Black Truck. We're not just a search marketing agency. No, we're trusted by brands to improve their discoverability and visibility online. That is completely different. It has a very different meaning. It also shows that we're just not doing just one thing. We care about very specific things within the realm of digital marketing. Now, step two is going to be brand voice and choosing adjectives that reflect how we want AI to perceive us. So are we reliable? Are we innovative? Are we technical? Are we authoritative? Are we performance driven? Are we accessible? Right. And that's not just plain buzzword bingo. You have to think of it like calibrating, a sensor or your GPS. We're teaching AI to recognize our signals, right? So we have to kind of train the trainer, so to speak. And we can help by making our brand voice discoverable in AI if we continue to further this and we talk about our attributes. So attributes are those things that are short, they're quotable statements that the machine can repeat, it can run with, and you're going to write for recognition. That might be on, say, product category pages, product description type pages, its specifications, certifications, and what I refer to as proof points. So you can plug this into everything that you write. You're going to have these types of statements on your homepage. You're going to have this type of language worked into your Google Business Profile, GBP. your media bios, right? And hopefully you have a PR team or you're working with somebody who is fluent with digital PR that can talk about these things more. If your digital PR team isn't on board with this, that's a problem. And we should probably talk to them and how we can educate them. But yes, even your structured data. So getting everyone on board and involved in this is critical because if AI can't recognize your authority, it's going to recommend a competitor. So that's going to be a big thing there. So and a tip for you too is keep those third-party listings and what I call like distributor content consistent. So if you work with other brands, are they talking about you in the same way? Are you working with other partners? Are they talking about you in the same way? This all matters. It's mattered for a long time, but I think more than ever it matters if we're looking to get mentioned and picked up by various AI tools. Well, let's talk about where to infuse that brand voice. I touched on it a little bit there, but it's not enough to define that brand voice. We have to deploy it in all places. We have to distribute that amongst where we're trying to have conversations because AI is listening. I just had a conversation on Monday with an individual. We were breaking down some segments around like what's important for Gen Z from a travel side of things. And she came right out and said, look, I can't think of a more important time to be focused on SEO and how SEO can also influence organic social strategies. Because now, with more and more of that user generated content and the social content being indexed and being pulled into the AI and search, all of that has to be more cohesive and be thought out more intentionally. So, this includes things like schema markup. Yeah, meta descriptions like, oh, this feels like SEO 101, but it's important. So meta page descriptions, meta page titles, like, are these dialed in? Do I fully understand and am I aware that Google will rewrite 60% of meta page titles? Yes, absolutely. That doesn't mean that you aren't trying to influence what it's going to represent your brand as. Your GBP listings, so again, Google Business Profiles and other local citation sources and third-party profiles. Just because you're a national brand or an international brand doesn't mean you shouldn't go and consider owning those entities. You may not view them as important, but they all provide signals to who you are, what your brand is about. Because if your voice only lives in your ads, AI is never going to hear it. So define what your voice is, define what your brand is about, and make sure you're exploiting that everywhere. So let's make it all stick. This is a mindset shift. So don't just write for people. Consider writing how you want to be quoted, how you want to be quoted by AI. Because if they start to summarize you, they're going to quote you. They being Google, they being any big tech platform. That means being intentional, being specific, structured in how you describe your brand. Because if AI starts to summarize your brand, your product, your services, you want it quoting you and not someone else. So, definition, what's your brand voice? Determine what your tone is, your facts, your mission, and not just like mission vision stuff. Like, really get this nailed down as to what you stand for. And avoid generic language. AI is going to ignore generic language. It knows generic language. That's not necessarily going to stand out. Be authentic with your brand and think about it in that regard and then deploy it consistently. So consistency is going to be crucial across structured and unstructured content. Structured is most likely going to be more on your site and what you own and control. Unstructured is potentially going to be elsewhere. So we're kind of heading into the end of this with part four of how do we audit all of this? How do we audit and measure the AI presence? So the biggest challenge that some brands are facing right now is just simply how your business breaks down. Are you a local service provider or are you a product manufacturer that sells things through distribution in e-commerce? Because presence and visibility, discoverability mean vastly, vastly different things. Again, it's not a cookie cutter strategy. It's not even a cookie cutter way to audit it based on what your industry and where people are looking for you. So test your AI presence. So start with a self-assessment, right? How is AI representing you? Audit how your brand appears in AI platforms right now. Many of you have probably done this. I've heard from a few folks who are attending the webinar that they've already started to do this and they're doing it in more advanced ways, and I love that. But look at how different audiences might be using tools like Google, like ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. If I'm someone like Visit Seattle, I want to make sure my region is well represented here, right? So what is Seattle known for? But look at what comes up and how it appears. What's my brand well known for? Can I ask those questions? And am I a part of that type of conversation? Because if you're more of a product or service oriented, then you really need to move into asking it about applications, much like a customer would, or like I did here, right? I want to know what the best performance stainless steel exhaust is for, XYZ F-150 with a 5-liter Coyote, because I'm a little bit of an automotive nerd. You can take screenshots of this and screen recordings just like this. And you want to look at what's cited and what's not and what's noted and whether it sounds like your brand. Are they pulling things in that actually sound like your brand? So prompt examples for you would be what is X, so your brand, known for? What are the best things to do with my brand, with my product, etc.? When is the best time to visit if I'm a destination? Those types of things. Or who is this best for? Start to think in that mindset because odds are that's what your customers might be searching for. Go scrape your Google Search Console data for those top queries that are more question oriented because typically, we tend to do more informational gathering searches with LLMs and AI than with, say, a traditional Google search, which might be more transactional, and see how you're being cited in these types of platforms. Now, capturing your presence within AI, I think this is a little bit of a checklist. You've seen how you appear, so here's your audit checklist. Are you showing up? Is the story accurate? Does the summary reflect your brand tone that you have set out to try and achieve? One red flag for me is that if it's outdated review type content, so aggregator sites, Wikipedia entries that dominate the summary, that's a problem. You need to be proactive in shaping what the AI pulls from you. Even more challenging is if you are a brand that has evolved. Maybe you have made some acquisitions, or you've divested some brands, or a partner left, or something like that. All of that starts to open up a completely different door, and AI is starting to shake those skeletons out of that closet, right? And you have to be more diligent about monitoring those things, where your brand is being mentioned, and ooh, how do we take care of that stuff? And is it pulling in some content that we really don't want it to, right? Well, let's talk about metrics to track because that's what's going to be asked of us is how important is this? How do we track it? How do we go about it? We're moving from traffic-based KPIs to visibility-based ones. So, and I know earlier in the webinar I talked about it isn't just about showing up and the click factor, but the old metrics and means of measurement still matter, but they don't tell the whole story anymore. So start tracking how often your brand is mentioned. So if I'm a destination, can I see how frequently my destination is being mentioned? Or if I'm a brand or a particular product within a category, how often is it being mentioned? Is it being cited? Is it being quoted? Even if those interactions don't generate a click, I want to start to have those conversations and I want to start to see if I can come up with a baseline. So, going to work on an upcoming webinar here probably in the next month or two where we start to talk about that breakdown and kind of cracking the code and measuring the impact when attribution falls short, because these types of changes and advancements continue to alter how you attribute the success of it. The old metrics, clicks, somebody clicked through, we can measure it. They came to my site, I can measure that. They were a session. Yep, got it. Now we're into visibility metrics, and not all tools are created equal here. Mentions in AI, that corpus of data is huge. It's not just saying, here's my keywords and what does that look like? It's, am I being cited frequently? What does that sentiment say about me as well? So, what's the sentiment about my brand in that summary? So, what's the tone, whether it's about my destination, whether it's about my brand? Is it positive? Is it neutral? Is it service oriented? Is it poor service oriented? Like, what's the sentiment around that depending on your industry? And just to kind of spotlight some tools, I think aside from performing your own searches, any number of the tool providers out there again have started to expand in this space in AIO tracking. Moz, Ahrefs, Search Engine Ranking, SEMrush, Stat, DemandSphere. There's a bunch of them, and many of those tools allow you to go beyond just Google AIOs, but the visibility into things like ChatGPT and Perplexity, etc. If those platforms allow for it and those data connectors, they're gonna do it. And we're gonna continue to see that grow. But you do have to ask what's the value there, right? So you can also look at Google Search Console to gain those insights on pages that are growing in impressions, but shrinking in clicks. So super low cost way to do it, right? Um, Google Search Console is free if you have access to it. Do a month over month or a quarter over quarter tends to be a view that I like to look at and look at, are my impressions growing for certain types of pages, or are my impressions growing for certain types of queries and my clicks are shrinking? That's going to help you start to narrow in on, perhaps those are the pages that are being cited in AI overviews or answer type responses. So that's a site that you're being seen and summarized instead of not necessarily being visited. But there's value there, and you have to start telling that story because unfortunately, that's the current and future world that we live in from a digital marketing perspective. And in some cases, your marketing dollars and your budgets are going to be tied to that. What you could measure as a success metric previously is or may not be relevant as you move into the next fiscal year. So, kind of prime you on that. And ultimately, you can't fix what you don't see. This is your monthly ritual, right? You audit, you update, and align because AI is constantly learning and it learns from what's most visible and what's most recent. Can I look at what's showing up in Google AI overviews? Can I measure those mentions? And am I leveraging the tools that can help me understand what AI might be seeing? And I wouldn't do this for everything on your site. I wouldn't do this for everything brand related or product related. Focus on a couple key areas, right? If you are an e-commerce retailer that has 100 categories and 1,000 products, you're never going to be able to do this on a monthly basis. I mean, hey, if you have the budget to do it, great. You're also an individual, or maybe you're a team of a few. Focus on the money making categories. Focus on the ones that are struggling or the ones that you want to really lift up. You don't necessarily need to focus on all of the things because, quite frankly, not everybody has the time to do that, nor is it going to be valuable to you, right? You're going to start to get lost in the shuffle of everything. So monitor your most cited pages and ensure they're up to date. Make sure they're structured appropriately, they align with your brand voice, and that's going to help them stay favored by AI platforms. Specifically, I want to talk about how do we measure traffic from the AI tools. I think this is an imperative step as you move forward. It's one thing to see, are we showing up? But what if they actually get there? And those numbers are small right now, right? That's kind of one of the myths, the myths and the hype of AI is like, oh man, it's going to generate all this traffic for me, etc. No, not really. Again, depending on the type of resource, depending on what's being cited, etc. But if you want to understand how this traffic stacks up to traditional sources, here's some things you can do. And thanks to my friend Dana DiTomaso at KP Playbook for her support in developing some really great tools and resources. Go into GA4 and you can create a new channel group that is based off of a regex. It's a big regex, but it'll help parse out the traffic. So anything from ChatGPT and stuff from OpenAI to Claude, etc., that then allows you to build reports. No, so the value of this really is now you have this separated out. You can manipulate the views. So it allows you to see how people from the LLMs or from the AI tools are actually interacting with your site. So maybe I only want to look at those people whose first interaction to my site was from an AI tool. Now I can do that. Perhaps you want to know any touch point from an AI tool and did it influence them, right? So I can look at my custom channel group, do some if this then that, and I can view it that way. But what about returning audiences? Because truth be told, in I would say a lot of lead gen as well as course signups, so informational type stuff, the returning customer value, if you will, is a lot higher with AI tool type traffic than not. But you have to have this first. Good news is you can actually, this is actually one of the areas you can backdate. So if you go and build this custom channel group that I talked about, and there's a link and in the description and the show notes, and I'll share it with you guys too afterwards, so you can go and look at the resource. I'm not going to take credit for it. It'll take you maybe like 5 or 10 minutes to sort it out. Dana has a wonderful video on it. Um, Super easy to do. It'll backdate that data. So once you configure that custom channel group, that data is technically already there. It's already inside GA4. You're just creating the channel group so that you can display it and show it. You also, if you are a Looker Studio user for data visualization, once you have it in GA4, keep in mind, I can visualize it and I can pull it in automatically as well moving forward. So it's a beautiful thing. Spend, 10 minutes, heck, even if it takes you an hour to do, then you have it moving forward and you can go back and look at it and see the growth of these things over time. It's also equally important because then when you're asked about these things in the boardroom, you can say, yeah, no, we're visible there, but is it really not worth the juice that you can squeeze out of it yet? So, how do we prepare for AI future? Kind of wrapping things up. Let's work through some methods to take everything that we covered and apply it across your organization. We've got about 10 minutes here, but from content strategy to partner communications. You want to search your brand, whether you are a destination, whether it's a category, it doesn't matter. The example I'm using here is destinations. Is it showing up in Google? Is it showing up in the AI overview? Is it showing up in ChatGPT? Are my top 5 high intent queries, best time to visit, best use of, whatever those high intent queries are that we know, are those showing up? Do we know what those are? Build and structure content on those top performing pages and categories, and then update your owned entities. So your GBP profiles, your social profiles, all of those outlets that you actually own but probably haven't touched in many months because you weren't sure the value of it. There's value in this stuff, and you need to make sure it's not only updated, but it's updated regularly. These seem basic, like brand forward language and core SEO strategy tactics. Again, seems super basic, seems marketing 101, but these are the things that train AI to trust and quote you. Kind of some midterm moves to help build a smart infrastructure. So over the next 3 to 6 months, focus on building that infrastructure. Add schema markup. If you don't know what schema markup is, send me a message. I'll help you understand it. There's plugins that can help you do this. If you have a WordPress site, if you're a Shopify site and you're in e-commerce, it's already baked in, but there's ways you can manipulate it and make it better. Partner with third-party publishers. Where can I be cited? Where can I be talked about? Digital PR stuff. Expand content hubs around unique themes, whether it's cases, like use cases, not case studies, use cases, problem areas, that type of stuff, and define how your team, whoever's involved, should be using AI internally to write, research, maintain that brand voice. That's really important. But that long-term vision, so for future-proofing now in Q4 of 2025 and beyond, this shift isn't just about marketing, it's a mindset. It might mean getting back to some of those basics as it pertains to marketing and your brand. But I think you want to work with coaching internal and external resources first and foremost. So, partners, aligning your stakeholders, that's going to be key. It's going to make these conversations a lot easier when you go to implement changes and get things passed. It's all about consistency. So, if you're working with an agency or a partner, have the expectation with them that they're going to think beyond just Google search. Google search is a large portion of it, but you want to think beyond that. And I'm not interested in waxing on acronyms like AEO and GEO and things like that. It's search at the end of the day. It's no longer about gaming the algorithms. It's about consistently training the AI to represent your brand accurately. So this is your mantra moving forward. Train the trainer. Train the AI by training your content. You can't control what Google or OpenAI will do, much like you can't control or anything that the media is going to say about you, but you can control how your content trains them. You can control what is shared with them. So we can no doubt invest a lot of time and money and resources into visuals that have a great impact in our brand, but we can also forget where our user starts their journey to begin with, right? And the majority of them start with a search. So clear, structured, confident content repeated consistently across all your platforms. That's going to help teach the AI to speak your voice. So build a system, not just a strategy. I want you to think like a publisher. Control your content ecosystem. I would say treat it like a system. You want to think about it that way. Train it. We want to train our teams and our partners. Coach the teams, coach your partners to speak your brand language. Don't assume they know. Don't assume they know. If they don't eat, sleep, and breathe your brand and its entities, you have to educate them and be very specific, be very direct about that, right? It's going to evolve, it's going to train, it's going to adapt, and then align on what that visibility is going to look like. Because one thing that assures is that you write the script AI is going to follow moving forward. So understand that visibility and what those engagement metrics are and how you're impacting that brand story that's going to be told by the AI. Google's AI specifically, ChatGPT and Perplexity, they already know your brand and it's time to help write that guide. So, did it hear that story from you or did it hear it from somebody else? Right? Everybody loves the gossip, everybody loves a good tea story, but if you have the opportunity right now to shape that narrative, you're going to take that and you're going to show up much more accurately, distinctively, and in a way that reflects who you really are. And before I close it out and see if we have any questions, big question I'm being asked now is, are LLMs, are AI tools outperforming organic search? So while there's a bunch of buzz generated around this, the data tells a different story. And this is an analysis from some wicked smart people from the University of Hamburg, Grips Intelligence Study, people who are much, much smarter than me. This is really fresh, as in earlier this week it dropped. This was nearly 1,000 e-commerce sites, $20 billion in revenue that show organic search still converts 13% higher than AI driven content. It's not to say that there isn't value there in AI driven content, but and AI driven traffic. So, what I'm trying to say is don't chase shiny objects. Double down on what's proven while we test and learn these emerging channels because we're watching this space closely as you are too. And there's still a lot of noise out there and a limited amount of signal. But traditional search remains our conversion workhorse, right behind things like affiliate, so referrals and email, the relationships that we have. So you have to keep that in mind. So let's wrap up real quick. Zero click is real and rising. We're not waiting for the future. It's here. Users are getting those answers without ever visiting your site. It's a discovery shift, not just a tech shift. So AI is going to prefer citations over clicks. Reminder of what this means. The search engines themselves are now rewarding things that are structured and quotable from a content perspective. It's not about more traffic. It's not just about more content either. It's about being the trusted source that something like AI is going to lean on when they're summarizing. So the voice and the structure equals your visibility. So voice isn't defined. AI is going to make one up for you. Define the voice. Or worse, they're going to borrow it from someone else who's telling your brand story. So make sure your brand is showing up in a way that you want to be known and audit your AI footprint regularly, whether that's monthly. Yeah, monthly might be okay. Quarterly, like don't do it weekly, right? Like that, I think that's going to get a little overwhelming, and your business may not move that fast, right? They may not warrant that, but search your brand on platforms like Google for their AI overviews, see if it's even showing up, or if an AI overview is triggered. Perplexity, ChatGPT, are you showing up? Is it accurate? Look at where it's pulling from and then prepare now. Don't react later, right? We're a very reactive industry from a search community, but it's not something to wait on. The longer you delay and adapt AI-driven visibility, I think the further you're going to be behind. So again, there's a lot of technical SEO pieces that go into this that are going to be really wise to consider as we move forward. So that's really the end of it. I really thank everyone so much for hanging out for the last hour. Please, by all means, reach out, connect, shoot me a message, jason@blacktruckmedia.com. We will send a follow-up after this. I'm going to check and see. I think there might be some Q&As here that I can ask. So let me address those real quick. So if you have a time constraint and you need to jump, totally respect that. Yeah, so one question, external partner listings can be a challenge given their licensing model for a particular brand. I know who this is. Can we influence our partners to make our voice consistent everywhere AI looks? A lot of times our corporate brand voice is very different from our partner's brand voice. Yeah, I think that's a really great one. I think you have to provide them with guidance. It's almost like a franchise model, right? There's certain things that you can and can't say. There has to be some guidelines there, meaning culturally, if it's a different country, the way in which they're going to describe your product and talk about your product is going to be vastly different than perhaps the domestic here in the United States. So you need to take that into consideration. You have to come up with at least some structured and some structured brand guidelines in terms of this is how we talk about this product. This is how we talk about our brand. It may not be the corporate brand in this case, but it may be those sub brands or those categories of how we talk about it. And from a resources perspective, is it professional? Are we playful? That type of thing, and really what you're going to be allowed or don't allowed to do. That's a super challenging one, but that's how I would approach it, just kind of off the cuff on that one. Another question comes up. Because clicks don't matter as much, visibility becomes more important. Agreed. When you show up on an AI generated list with your competitors, are there strategies to be listed before them? Ooh, hot take. Unknown at this point in time. Truthfully, honesty has served our company really well for the past 16 years, and I'm not going to tell you something that may or may not be true. Um, no, it really is up to their discretion. If it's in the local market, I can tell you it's a popularity contest. There's a number of sites out there from an aggregator perspective that I've probably turned a blind eye to because I don't want to play their game. I don't want to play their game. Like I'm just going to rewrite that like Bart Simpson on the chalkboard, but your hand is almost being forced into that. So, and I think that if you follow that and you look at where they're showing up, that has a lot to do with it. I'm also seeing it where just being alphabetized has a lot to do with it. There's sometimes an advantage to having, the second letter in the alphabet be a part of your brand name. I've seen that happen. So a little bit unknown there. I don't feel like I'm answering that question as solidly as I want, but I'm happy to chat more about that. And then looks like last question coming in. What, if any, do you see as the impact of AI browsers on search? That's a wonderful question, right? So we've got Atlas that just launched on Mac. Sorry if you're a PC user, but that just came out. What's wild about that right now is where they're getting their information from. Their OpenAI is notorious. They're pulling it from Google. So where do you think the search is going to happen at the end of the day? It's still gonna filter through search through Google search. The impact is unknown. I do think we'll have an impact on it, but how widely adapted is it going to be? We saw that if you look at the early days of, say, OpenAI and ChatGPT, the growth with that really was us, marketers. We were the problem. We're the ones that are growing the hype on that. I read a stat the other day that something like 60 or 66% of Americans don't consider themselves to be tech savvy. Do you think that they're going to adopt a new browser when all they know is what's native on their phone? No, they're not. So until these things become more seamlessly integrated into our devices, right? So Gemini, if I'm on a Pixel, um, or whatever it is that Apple is conjuring up, until you start to see those things become more interwoven where you don't get a choice, I don't think the adoption is going to be that huge outside of perhaps the marketing sphere or people that just are looking for a different experience. And that's just one of those things we have to keep in mind as well, is like you're going to be a litmus test of that, but I'm making the assumption those are the participants and myself included. We're marketers. We're a little atypical in this stuff anyways, right? Like the majority of users out there absolutely will click on a paid search listing. Majority of us on this call know what that is, and we're probably not going to click on that, right? So, but really great questions. Love it, and we'll absolutely provide a lot of this in the follow-up in our consensus and notes too. So, thanks everybody so much for showing up today. Greatly appreciate that. And again, if you have any questions, you have my contact information and it'll be in the follow-up. But thanks so much for joining us and have a wonderful afternoon.